I'm Chris Farrell from the All Things Good and Nerdy podcast, a wacky weekend morning show, part of the Gonna Geek Network, just like the show you're checking out right now. Shows on the network are individually owned, All Things Good and Nerdy podcast, a wacky weekend morning show, part of the Gonna Geek Network.
That's YouTube. I don't know. Did you hear it, SP? You probably
didn't. No, I did not.
No, because of the mix minus. All right, we'll do it again. It was loop backing.
Yeah, I did that same thing on Sunday.
Sorry?
I did that same thing on Sunday with Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Oh, sorry about that. Here, everybody. I know you want to hear Chris again because he's the best part of this show, let's be honest.
I'm Chris Farrell from the All Things Good and Nerdy podcast, a wacky weekend morning show, part of the Gonna Geek Network, just like the show you're checking out right now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and the opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other awesome geeky shows over at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
We're jamming to Better Podcasting Live. It is Tuesday, April 6th, 2021. We are here to answer your questions about podcasting. So come on into our live chat at www.geeks.live, Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. I am here with my lovely producer and co-host, Steven. Steven, how's it going?
Oh, am I here? I didn't know. It was so unusual of changing. It feels like, whenever you intro the beginning of the show, there should be a different guest. So can I go by a different name like Stefan John Drew?
I'm looking at Clem Cladiddlehopper, actually, and I believe this is the only time where we've ever been on either Better Podcasting Live or Better Podcasting that I have actually introed the show. You've done it every single other time. You just weren't saying anything. So I thought, well, might as well step in.
Well, you know why I do that, though, right? Is because, I always want to set the bar really low. So then I'm the first one to come in. So it's like, wow, this is a terrible show. And then they hear SP and they're like, wow, so much better. And so you're naturally better. But when I come in there with a low bar, it makes you sound even better, if that's even possible.
It just means I can win the limbo contest.
Yeah, it's been a month since we did Better Podcasting. Something like that. Live chat. It's been a while since we've done Better Podcasting live chat. And hey,
been a month.
Hey, guess what? The last episode that we had might have had two versions for you. I don't know if you checked that out. You might have been lucky enough to get the SP test edition. I don't know if you did get that or didn't get that, but if you did not get that, let's loop you into that right now. Last episode, we had a full conversation about the mute button and the benefits of having a mute button and things like that. And I also talked about editing out things when you run into problems, even if it's a raw show. And you know what went out, SP? There went out a version where you were saying test, test, test all the time that you were muted. And also somehow the edit got messed up where the section that I said, hey, I will be removing this, ended up back in the show. I think what happened was I must not have saved in between when I had taken out that section. And also, I guess I took out the section and didn't save and must have closed it and then came back to it. So what ended up happening was it was a complete weird episode, and the numbers showed a few people got that, but we thought, okay, we'll fix it and we'll put it out again and blasted that out. So hey, guess what? That was a fun little. We don't often edit this, but SP was having some serious problems last time, and
yes, I was.
So we definitely edited that one out.
Yeah, one of my problems is I need to learn how to use the right mute button. It was just exactly what we were talking about on the show. It was just so funny. So I had muted my connection that we have between the two of us on OBS Ninja, but I didn't mute the board. So of course, everything I was saying was being recorded, which is actually what I needed at the time because I was trying to troubleshoot, make sure that my volume was consistent going out to my recorder. And oh my gosh, I totally flipped out. I'm so tired. I did not remember to tell you to take that out. And of course, it ends up the final show. And I think it was Damien that messaged us on the Discord servers. Hey, did you guys mean to do this? Or was this a mistake? And then we found that Steven's little gaffe there too. So yeah, we both had slight issues throughout the show, but I will take full responsibility because that should not have happened for me.
Well, and we make it no secret that this is largely unedited, and that's because, like, we decided to do this show with the understanding that I would not preview it before posting. It's the
Yeah.
nature of the show. I
Yeah.
take it both of our tracks, I shove them together, and if there is something like where something technically went wrong and I have to remove that, I remove that. And other than that, it is largely unedited. So I did not even preview that. And what's really bad about it is, like, I actually had a moment for some reason, and I wish I could say it was because I remembered your issues. I wish I could say that I had that forethought, but there was something when I went to publish that night. I thought, maybe I'll give this one just a preview before I publish, but I didn't because I ran out of time or something like that. And it was just one of those things that I remember thinking, if you got time, do it. And then I didn't have time. So I wish I had listened to myself. It was clearly my subconscious telling me, hey, you screwed up, Steven.
Yeah, well, whatever. It's a learning experience, and we can move on with stuff from that. So, for everybody that got the version that I said test, please let us know, because we want to know if you heard it and if you got the actual edition afterwards, and just as a test case, and we'll talk about it next time.
And also, I should just say, getting a little outside of what we usually talk on here, SP is a big space fan, and so he follows all the space things. And one of the things that came up when they sent the most recent rover to Mars is there was a little bit of a secret message that was left on said rover. So pay attention to all of the tests that were in that, and maybe, just maybe, you will find a Mars rover inspired secret message.
Perhaps you're just making it up. It's been fun. The Mars rover has been really fun. It's been a new technology out there on Mars, and what we've been discussing over the past several months, maybe half a year, is getting some new technology in my studio. And I know Steven's been looking at some little upgrades to his studio as well. The biggest upgrade that I've been looking at is a new mixer recorder. So the Rode Procaster, Zoom P8, Zoom L8, Zoom L12. One thing that I do have is the Zoom H8. Unfortunately, it's not going to work for the purposes that I use for podcasting because I need a mix minus, and the Zoom H8 does not have a mix minus. So I think it was you that originally brought it up, and then some of our fans brought it up. And I've been thinking about changing it out for my now aging Zoom H6 that is on the stand and has been on the stand for quite some time, just to try it out, see if the preamps are better, see if the recording is better, that sort of thing. I don't anticipate it being that much different, to be honest with you, because my audio is pretty clean from the compressors and the digital processor, the DBX 286, as it goes up. And Steven's putting all his mixers on his backsplash right now. He's using the Rodecaster, so he can't have that, but he's got the L12, the L8, he's got the Zoom P4, or the Zoom PodTrack P4, and we have a lot of toys to play with. And I'm jealous a little bit, but none of which he has will do what I want it to do in the studio. And as we're finding out, even with the revisions, the Rodecaster is still not it. So I'm stuck. I don't want to buy a $600 machine, or whatever it is, $506 machine, and not have what I really want. So I don't know what's going to happen. I know I've got the Zoom H8. I know that can take me forward a few other years. I just hate to replace the Mackie mixer with another $500 mixer, because I really want just a one-stop shop where I could have a Rodecaster Pro sort of feel with a digital control panel, the processor on board, and everything like that, with as many inputs that I need. And it's not meant for me, unfortunately. Yeah. I know it's meant for a lot of people, but it's not meant for me.
You're mentioning the Rodecaster here, and one of the things that I think ties nicely into the whole mute story is that I am using the Rodecaster Pro right now. And the reason why I'm using it is because on the heels of the mute button issue that I ran into with my mute button not working, we were talking about some of the other solutions and things like that. And I was pretty sure I had read that the Rodecaster had updated to incorporate the mute into the multi-track recording. So I thought, you know what? It's been a while. Let's dig it out. It's been about a year. Let's dig it out and give it a try. And find the latest feature so that I can speak a bit more about where it's at as it stands. And so I'll just quickly mention, I just dug this out the other day and have just done this show on the Gonna Geek show with it, and just as a bit of a test bed for a little while and see how I feel about it, because I am not multi-tracking audio anymore on any of my podcasts just because of the way that I've just been lazy. So I don't need the full multi-track mix minus that the L12 and the L8 did at the moment. One day I'm sure I will again. But after hooking it up, I'll go into this more in the future, but just a couple quick notes. Number one, benefit that I've noticed with the Rodecaster Pro is the granular controls. I had read that they had made it so you could go in and enable more control over the different processing, and it's great. When you go into the compressor, you now have the ability to add or modify a bunch of those compressions, like the ratio and the threshold and things like that. So for someone who's more technically abled, it is great having those features on there. Also, you can now do post-fader multi-track recording. The way this worked before was like the L8, where you had a mix down that was well processed, but then going to the multi-track recording for each track, you had mostly a raw form. So if you hit mute, that was recorded. If you had effects on, those were not on the recording, that sort of thing. Well, they did make it so that you can go and enable post-fader effects, meaning if you hit mute, post-fader recording, meaning that if you hit mute, that's not on the multi-track recording. If you got effects on, those are on there. So it all is more flexible now in some of the options that are on there. And the other thing that I want to say is that, yes, SP, finally, they have confirmed my suspicion on the Rodecaster Pro from the beginning was correct. There was a master compressor on there. Now, if you go way back to the Better Podcasting archives, you probably, when we first got it, I think I read out an email that I got from Rode, and they had said there was no master compressor on it when I had emailed them. Yet, all the experience that I had was that I could not get the Rodecaster to clip. I could not get the Rodecaster Pro to clip. Therefore, there must have been a master compressor if I had no compressor on each track, yet I could not get the bloody thing to clip. There must have been something compressing. Sure enough, when you add those advanced features on whatever they call it, granular controls, I think, you now have an option on the master compressor to disable that. And yes, you can get it to clip now. With that said, there is also options in there to disable ducking per track. So, ducking is where if you've got two tracks going and one of them starts speaking, then the music will come down and that sort of thing. That's what's called ducking. Even though that's disabled on the Rodecaster, I definitely 100% hear ducking happening even with the master compressor off. So what I mean by that is, like, I right now have going in through an analog adapter to one of my channels, the music that I play live. When that's playing and I start speaking, or the USB starts speaking with like SP's track coming to the Rodecaster, I am hearing that music go down a little bit, and I'm seeing it on the levels go down. So there still is something going on there with some form of master compression of some form. I don't know what it is. So there's still something that we don't have granular controls over, but at least the overall master compressor is going, which is good, because just hit me up in Discord. I won't get into it now. The concerns that I have on that is that with the master compressor, you could have problems. You might not set your gain right, and I'll just leave it at that. The other thing that I want to highlight is that, unfortunately, the preamps do still seem noisy. I was hoping it was related to that master compressor where we were hearing hiss and things like that, but it's not the case. You go and you set your input level to where it needs to be, basically your amount of gain per input. Whether your cord's plugged in or not, once you turn up that fader, you start hearing hiss, unless your noise gate is enabled. So you turn off all of the effects, the compressor, the noise gate, you turn it all off, and plugged in, unplugged, doesn't matter what microphone I plug in, I keep hearing extra hiss that I don't hear elsewhere. So preamps definitely seem to be noisy, which is a shame. So as the moment, I'm actually still using my DBX 286 to really try to give it that extra gain. But that's sort of my quick snapshot of what I've seen. But yeah, I'll maybe do something more detailed in the future. Now that it's been about a year since we last ventured down the Rodecaster Pro avenue.
Yeah, and they've had a lot of firmware updates. Say the reason we do this show every other week is to answer your podcasting questions. And we got a podcasting question from Betsy in our Discord server right before we went online tonight. And she asked, hello from South Lake Tahoe, which is the same Steven time zone. Won't be able to watch the live show tonight, but I have a silly question. I need to buy some SD cards for my Zoom PodTrack B4. How much storage needed for a 1 hour recording? Looked online, but couldn't really find any information. You also can just let me know here on Discord if it's not a live chat worthy. Thanks. Betsy is live chat worthy. I mean, we're talking about it here on live chat and it's live chat worthy. Okay. I think there's probably a misnomer. You don't want to buy your SD card just for the 1 hour recording. You want to buy it for as much recording that you think you might have in a complete session until the SD card is full. Now, for me, on my Zoom H6, I just use the maximum amount of card that it can read, which is 64 gigabytes. And I use it until it's all done. And then I buy a new one. We talked about why on the show before. In a nutshell, it's because I keep it as another backup for all the raw recording. And if you reuse the SD cards enough, they're going to fail on you. So I just jump ahead of that failure and just buy a new one every time. So it's not exactly single use. I get maybe up to 60 different recordings, depends how long it is on and how many tracks I'm recording on my 64 gigabyte SD card. But for a 1 hour recording, it really depends on like the rate that you're recording on and stuff like that. But for a wave recording for 1 hour for one track, my guesstimate is somewhere between 600 and 800 megabytes just for one track. So if you multiply it by 4, if you got all 4 tracks going, then that's 800 times 4 is roughly 3.2 gigabytes, right? So that's just one recording, and then you extrapolate for how many other recordings you're going to have. Now, the Zoom P4, I believe, is a micro SD card, not a normal SD card, right, Steven?
Yeah. The other thing that I want to mention as well, with the whole micro SD card thing is that SP does use his for one-time use. But lots of people do repurpose them, reuse them. I'm one of them. But you want to pay attention to what your capability is with that hardware, because some of them have a maximum size that they will take. Right. I would encourage you to, if it's affordable, like find that sweet spot of size versus like price and try to buy the biggest one that's sort of in that threshold that your recorder will take. Because whether you are using them once like SP or you're reusing them, it's just so beneficial to not have to, every other week change it out or delete the files or whatever you're doing. So take a look. I just actually, to do this Rodecaster Pro test, I did have to get a new SD card just because I like to keep the SD card with the devices I have. Again, ask me on Discord if you want to find out more why I do that. But I put a 128 gig micro SD card in the Rodecaster Pro, and I have, whenever it's recording, I guess it would be 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, somewhere's around 10 to 12 tracks recording, just because of the stereo aspect of it. And it is telling me I have 15 hours plus worth of recording. I guess it must max out at that. So, find that sweet spot, and I would say just buy the biggest one that is in that sweet spot. And also, look for a quality brand name. And if you're going to buy online, make sure you look at the reviews, because unfortunately there are, at least in Canada, a lot of reviews on a certain online vendor that looks like maybe the inventory gets mixed up and not always a legit card. And so what happens is it might say 128, but these fraudulent or fake cards, they're actually only like 64 gigs or something, and they just trick the way that it at first reads. So keep an eye out. I actually usually stick to in-person retailers for that reason, unless it is one online that like has glowing reviews.
So I did look it up really quick because I couldn't remember if it was micro or not. It's a normal SD card, but it can
Oh,
go
is
up to
it?
500. Yeah, it can go up
Oh.
to 512 gigabytes. So it's pretty big, but it can only record at 16-bit, 44.1 kilohertz wave. So the wave file is going to be pretty big. Yeah, it's a normal SD card.
Yeah, I was thinking of the Rodecaster Pro. That's why I thought that's what
Yeah,
it was.
so what I was too. It doesn't matter. The same issues that Steven was talking about are true. Make sure it's good quality, make sure it has good reviews, and make sure the price is affordable to you. Most in America, at least, most 64 gigabyte cards that are reasonable are somewhere between 12 and 20 bucks now, closer to 12 bucks now. And 64 gigabytes can get you quite a few recordings. So you'd be fine with that. And then you could trade them out. Matter of fact, if you have two, so if one runs out, if you run out of storage, you can quick pop the other one in. I think that's it. And I have not used the P4 enough to remember if it shows you how much time is left. I know on every other Zoom that I've had, it shows you how much time you have. The Zoom H6, H5, H8, they all show how much time is left, just like you said.
And the other thing too is keep in mind that you likely will be recording 4 tracks at at some point when you're using it. That is a lot of information being recorded, so don't go with an off-brand, super generic, looks way lower price tag than everything else SD card, because you will likely run into those writing issues when you do that. They probably aren't very good quality, or they write slower, and that causes problems too. Good question. And if you got a question like that, you can always hit us up on our Discord at betterpodcasting.com/Discord. Email podcast@betterpodcasting.com. Tweet us at betterpod, or come over live when we do record Better Podcasting or Better Podcasting live chat, which is usually Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific. I'm going to leave it right there at 5 p.m. Pacific because Betsy's right now in the Pacific time zone at the moment.
At least in your time zone. Yeah.
Hey, I know that you also wanted to enlighten a certain Canadian about something he should be aware of.
That's right. I ran into this. We've been talking a little bit about podcast awards on the main Better Podcasting show and in our Discord server. But the one thing that I wanted to get out now, because there's a limited amount of time, the Canadian Podcast Awards are now open for nominations. They are open until April 30th. You can find all the information at CanPod Awards. That's CANPOD awards.ca. That's that special CA that you can only get when you're in Canada. And there is just a ton of categories. I know a lot of people that listen to Better Podcasting are Canadian, and I know that they have a plethora of different podcasts. There's a category out there for you. Now, I was curious because I podcast with Steven on a couple of shows, actually 3 shows, if you count Better Podcasting Live as a different show. So I was wondering if he could submit like all 3 shows to the awards. On their website, there is a FAQ, and one part of the FAQ is define Canadian podcasts. So here is the following criteria that they have. 1, the producer must be Canadian. So bingo, he's got that.
Hold on, there we go. There we go.
Right. The scope of this criterion can pertain to a commercial production company or an independent producer. And you are obviously an independent producer, unless you've incorporated and you haven't told me.
Not yet.
Okay. Number 2, at least 50% of the podcast host or performers must be Canadian or a permanent resident of Canada. Womp, womp.
Well, at least, so this one would apply.
Yeah,
50%.
this one.
Maybe we can get JS back to the Good and Geek show for a limited run.
That's true. Or Wing, or both of them to get more than 50%. So Better Podcasting would count because it's 50%. Better Podcasting Live, this show, would count because it's 50%. Unfortunately for you, the GoodAGeek.com show would not count unless, like you said, you got JS or Wing or both to be on the show for a little bit. Okay, number 3, in cases where podcasts are produced by a team, it must be demonstrated that the majority of the team members, more than 50%, are Canadian citizens or permanent residents of Canada. So I think we can confidently say, even though we share a lot of the duties in post and in pre-show, getting ready for the show and that sort of thing, and the social media and the outreach, community outreach, I can safely say of all the three podcasts that we just described, Better Podcasting Live, Better Podcasting, and the GuineaGeek.com show, that you are the majority producer. Matter of fact, you're the singular producer. I could step in and produce it. It's not like I'm incapable of doing it. Chris could step in and produce the GuineaGeek.com show, but it's not like he's incapable of doing it either, because he does it with All Things Good and Nerdy. But you have done it. So I think that checks that box for all three shows. Unfortunately, the 50% of the Canadian hosts couldn't. I don't know. I'd apply the GuineaGeek.com show. I'd submit it and just see where it goes. I don't know if you've taken a look at the website or not, but there's definitely a category for it.
You know what we'll do? We'll just submit the archive when we did have 50% Canadian.
Oh, that's
just
good.
Up to that point.
You know, if you take a look at the archive, if you count the two, if you count JS and Wing of the longevity of the show, it's right? Probably over 50%.
Right?
Yeah.
So there we go. Okay, so first off, I would never actually, kidding aside, I would never try to skirt the rules on that. I just think like podcasting and podcast awards are so problematic in their own way right now. I would feel bad if I willingly tried to skirt the rule on that.
Well, why
better podcasting, I would.
Why don't you contact them and see if they would allow it or not?
Yeah, I mean, okay, fair enough.
It's a good question, because we talk, and if it's just over the last year, then you have a problem. But if it's over the life of the show, then you're good.
And then secondly, I will say in the chat, Bangs Naughty Bits is in our chat. He is doubting my Canadianism, and I need to prove it. So to that, I would just like to say, sorry, everybody. I just have to say that, okay?
And if anybody listened to last week's Better Podcasting episode, we talked all about Steven's illicit maple syrup business.
Also, Betsy, who did submit that question a minute ago, did pop into the chat and say, hey, from Heavenly Ski Resort. So waiting on burgers and heard my name on the live chat. Thanks, Betsy. Thanks for watching while we're away, or while you're away. We wish we were away.
I wish I was away. Maui's looking pretty good right now.
Thanks for bringing this up. I truthfully was not aware of this. I should have been aware of it. So that's awesome. That's awesome.
I expect to see the proof that you've nominated Better Podcasting and Better Podcasting Live in there, and I would like to get proof from you that you've communicated with the organizers to find out about Gonna Geek.
For the audio listeners, right now, Better Podcasting and I, SP and I are wearing Better Podcasting t-shirt or polo shirts. Both of us are. And you know what? My color is red to represent Canada. His is blue to represent America. So there you go. We're just trying to prove 50% right now. Split down the middle.
Normally red in America means that you're Russian or Chinese. So I don't know if that helps you.
Yeah, I got white writing, white and red. That's the Canadian colors. We also have something that you wanted to bring up about if the professional podcast industry is having a problem defining the scope of duties for a podcast producer. What?
Yeah, I ran into this article on vulture.com, and it was titled "Are Podcast Producers Properly Valued?" It was published on March 23rd, 2021. Now, in New York City, there's this whole big issue about podcast producers being treated poorly. They're trying to unitize, trying to unionize, and they're just trying to get better working conditions and be treated like actual workers, more along the lines of like the radio broadcast community rather than sweatshop workers. Because, well, let's face it, doing podcast work can be like working in a sweatshop sometimes. There's long hours, there is incredible deadlines, last minute deadlines, probably no overtime. And I don't know exactly how it's being worked in these New York City podcast production companies, but we've heard a lot in the news over the past few years about this issue. So yeah, this article came in and was talking about all the duties that podcast producers actually do. Is producer the actual correct term because of all the duties they do? And it goes into basically this big long sob. So I'm going to say it's a sob story. It's actually factual, but it's a big long sob story about all the stuff that podcast producers do and how they should be valued more and they basically should be paid more and that sort of thing. And I'm like, okay, you are describing absolutely everything an independent or a hobby podcast producer has to do with a team of one.
Yeah.
A team of one usually. And sometimes you have a team like we kind of do on the Guinea Geek show. We know other shows out there that have a team of 2 or 3 that pull things together. But usually when it comes down to it, there's one person that can count themselves as the podcast producer because they're doing most of the editing, the publishing, all of the promotion, that sort of thing. And sometimes the promotion duties get spun off to other co-hosts. But okay, yeah, we've known this for a while. And that is why we can't compete with a team of 5, 10, 15, 20. We talked about this like all month, it seems like, on both shows, both on Better Podcasting Live and when we podcasted a month ago, and on the Better Podcasting main show, that there is a difference between the industry and independents and how independents and hobbyists find it difficult to compete because of that time factor in there. And this article is de facto saying that podcast production is so hard that these producers should be valued more. And I'm saying, yeah, I've done it for 10 years. Steven, you've done it for more than 10 years. You know what you're talking about. I know what I'm talking about. And yes, this is something that I can agree with. Now, how do I feel about like there being an elevated status of being a podcast producer that's professional versus an independent or a hobbyist? I mean, I'm doing the same work and I'm not getting the same accolades or the same respect or something like that. So we'll see how I feel about that long term. But I'm just taking the time now, as I have for the past month, to point this out that yes, it is a thing.
Yeah, no, I think this is actually something that probably stems from inexperience with titles when podcasting grew, because podcasting came out of a lot of sort of technical people that were doing other things that weren't necessarily in mainstream media. And so when they started to define the roles, I think that we just kind of fell into the term producing for what we all vision as a podcast producer. And I've wondered this before, and you and I have had some offline conversations before about this, about, well, is a producer like what we think of as a podcast producer? Are they really a producer? Like, or are they more? And can you have multiple producers on shows? Because you have multiple producers on TV shows and radio and things like that. So absolutely. And I will say that somewhere along the way, when we added the outro to Better Podcasting, we somewhere modified it to say produced and edited by me. And the reason I did that was because, number one, I like more credit to myself, let's be honest. But number two, the real reason was that I think a lot of people, a lot of hobbyists, this was my thoughts, thought that a producer of a podcast did most of the heavy lifting, including the editing. And so I thought it was important to add that extra thing in there, even as a subtle thing, that there is a difference between a producer and an editor, because we've done episodes before where we've talked about how different people can edit your show. Different people can generate content for your show and might be considered a producer for your show. And I think, like, even in the sense of this show here, right? Like, realistically, we probably should have a producer tag for you because we both generate the content. But at the time that we made that, what people thought of as a podcast producer was more what I was doing with the show. So I think that the term producer does definitely need to be looked at more in the world of podcasting. But at the end of the day, it's a moot point for most independents because there are so much shared duties that you might find everybody's deserving of a producer title if we were to use it true and true. And we probably should actually at some point where we get Lauren to redo our work to say produced by Steven and SB and edited by Steven and video produced by Steven and marketing manager SP and just a big long 5-minute outro. I think that's what we should have.
There's a lot of professional shows that are doing the credits at the end of the show like that. I've noticed that over the last couple of years. You know, a friend of ours produces a professional show, Curiosity Daily, and they put credits on the back end of their show for the last like year and a half. But other shows that I've been listening to that didn't previously have credits at the end have started to throw credits at
Yeah.
the end of their shows here in 2021. And I appreciate it quite a bit because I get to hear the complete. It's like you're watching a movie, right? And the movie credits go for like 15 minutes. There's a
Yes.
reason, because that hundreds and possibly thousands and sometimes tens of thousands of people work on some of these blockbuster movies, so they should get the credit for being part of that. And I think podcasts is the same way. Everybody that works on the podcast should get credit for being their part on the podcast.
In the chat, we had on Johnny Pennington saying, on television film, a producer credit is often given for some money or other things, money-making proposition. If you also look at a lot of the incentives some people do on, can't think of the name everybody uses, Patreon, thank you. A lot of times people give away a producer credit and when someone donates. And again, I'll just encourage you to go to our Discord server and we could open up a whole conversation about that, because I don't know that people necessarily think that through when they do that. And with the ever-growing list of databases out there, I'll put it out there. This has been my little secret for a while. I think someone very well could go around, and I've thought of doing this myself, and you do a couple Patreons on a couple big shows, and next thing you know, you get to claim that you're a producer on a show because they decided to give that away without thinking it through. And it's true. You do the Patreon, they say that you get a producer credit, and now you can go and you can put your I don't know if IMDb gets into podcasts, you're a producer on there, or wow, I am drawing a blank tonight. Podchaser. I can't think of any of these names. And you do that. So, you know, like, I don't know that podcasters always think through what they're giving away. And so that's sort of been, you know, something I've kind of thrown around here and there before. And so yeah.
A lot of the YouTube sailing channels that I follow, I'm not a Patreon of all of them, but I am a Patreon on some of them. And I've been noticing that some of their Patreon levels in the past, there's been like 50-50. Some will give a producer credit, and some got smart and they didn't call it producer. They deliberately did not call it producer because they knew all the implications that came with it. Apparently in some countries, because not all sailing channels are produced in the United States or Canada, but some countries out there, if you're a producer of something, that you automatically deserve royalties from like the ad revenue and stuff and the syndication, or if that is ever happening on YouTube. So yeah, they got smart and they deliberately did not call their Patreon levels a producer level for that reason. I think you're just going to see more and more of that.
Yeah.
I think you're going to see the relabeling of some of these levels, these contributing levels on Patreon, away from the producer title for that very reason. Or if you give enough money, they will throw a producer credit. Like if you're going to give $10,000 per episode, yes, you're going to get a producer credit. Absolutely. And if you do that, by the way, it depends on how much it costs to produce your show. But if you take, like, if we took a $10,000 donation for each episode, a producer donation for each episode of Better Podcasting, Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D., Gonna Geek, I think that calls into question the integrity of those shows, because we're automatically biased to do what the producer wants us to do.
Fair enough. And we will definitely become biased for the right price tag. I'm just kidding.
$100,000 a show US. Me, I don't care what Steven gets, but $100,000 US per show for me.
A couple more quick things before we close it down for this episode, because, you know, we'll go a little long today because it's been a month since we did this. First thing that I wanted to mention was it's change time in the Steven studio here. I decided that it was time to buy some new equipment. And I'll be honest, it's largely related to work from home. I've been working at home for a year now. A lot of my stuff that I use is showing the signs of being here every single day, but also I've had some of it for a while. So I am looking to get a new chair. In fact, I might be using a new chair right now, but I'm not confident on it right now. It's not been a good day, so we'll leave it at that. But I'm looking to I've got a new chair going. But here's the big thing that I did. For my work arrangement, I actually bought a sit stand riser because in my office for a couple of years, like in office, I've had a sit stand desk, and I did like that. I like the ability to sit and stand. So I decided I was going to get a sit stand riser for my desk. And here's the thing about that is the the section that I use on my desk for work is also my main monitors when I'm not working. So this weekend I edited, I think it was this show actually. Yes, it was this show. I edited whatever. The Better Podcasting Show standing, and oh man, I loved it. I loved every second about it. I thought it was so much more comfortable just to stand and edit rather than sitting down because I sit a lot in the day anyways. So I loved it. I loved having the sit stand thing. And also, I decided I was going to install the monitor risers that I bought forever ago, which is great because now instead of 2 bases for my monitors, I have 1 base that has the arms that split off to the monitor. So, things are changing and it looks a lot cleaner now. I got the sit stand ability and I need to find a little bit better chair. But hey, at least the creak's gone right now, but we'll see. It might not last very long. It's not, I don't know about the comfort on it. And then the other thing that I want to mention is the dilemma that I've got is like, I talked about my backdrop needs to change and I got to do that at some point. I think I really, really, really do want to get another sit stand riser for the way that I face when I podcast. I kind of think I want to stand when I podcast again. No, and I say again because when I did audio podcasts and I wasn't on video, a lot of times I would stand when I podcast. But they also say that when you stand, then you got the whole, it's good for your diaphragm alignment and all that other stuff. So apparently people who are like on the wacky morning shows that are super high energy, they stand. Everybody comments how high energy I am on this show when I'm sitting. So SP, I apologize in advance if I do end up standing to podcast with you.
I think it's good. Matter of fact, if I redid everything, I would get a sit stand desk or something so that I could move up the monitors. My microphone's already good. It's on a boom arm. All I have to do is raise it up. And I would enjoy to stand because I have noticed my energy waning in the latter parts of some podcasts, particularly Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. And that was particularly when we were podcasting later in the day. Now we're doing Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. 5 p.m. on Sunday afternoons. So I am able to keep up my energy longer. But like on the Gonna Geek show, sometimes we'll go past 10 p.m. Eastern time and it just gets a little late for me being as old as I am. Remember, I am AARP age. So yeah, standing for me would help. I just have no way of doing it in my studio right now with this desk from 1950, this beautiful cherry executive desk from 1950. I can't do it without some sort of riser on it. And I can't have a riser on it with my audio rack also on the desk. So that's one of the reasons that I wanted to upgrade to that mixer recorder, as I wanted to get into the sit stand desk. So I'm jealous. I do have a sit stand desk at work. I do use it. I was using it today and I was telling Steven, I was using my mat today. It was really cool. I've got a nice mat and I can stretch my legs. It's got different things on it. I can roll my feet on it. So it's so good. So I just miss that here because I can't. I have to sit down here.
You bring up a point though, actually. I might have to pull the trigger on it before it's out of stock because the sit stand riser that I bought the other way, it has a perfect gap in front of my monitors that would fit the board right. And if you've ever gone to my Twitter profile, I have my mixer off to the right just from a space perspective, but it would be perfect. The board would actually fit perfectly in front of the monitors with the keyboard below it. I might do that, or I leave it off to the side and only sit and stand, but then I'd have to fix my backdrop because as it is, if I was to stand, you would see above my backdrop. So maybe I need a rising backdrop. No, that's not happening.
That would be cool. Hey, so just hot off the presses here, literally, we've gotten a couple of comments in chat and in the Discord server at betterpodcasting.com/Discord. And I will credit Alirun, Jason there for mentioning it first. Apparently there's an email. You probably have it in your email right now, Steven. Jason says, hot off the presses, Rode finally released actual ASIO drivers for the Rodecaster Pro for Windows. No more, hopefully, ASIO for all. The new MIDI functionality looks cool too. So as you've just drug it out, maybe you're going to have to upgrade to the next. I'm assuming it's another firmware upgrade to figure that out. So as we're podcasting here on April 6th, 2021 at 8:50 p.m. Eastern time, we just got word of it right now. So we have no comment right now. Maybe in a couple of weeks when we come back, we'll have comment on it. Maybe next week on the Better Podcasting Show, we can comment on it too.
Oh, that's great. That's actually a pretty big win, especially for musicians who are using the multi-track input. So that's fantastic, or I guess output from Rodecaster Pro. So that's great. Really good. I've talked a little bit about the ASIO, however you want to say it, benefits before on the show. Cool.
Yep.
And last thing I think we should mention right now is there was a pod news story about a 301 redirect issue to do with Libsyn, ? And Amazon Music, was it?
I saw this in Pod News, and I haven't dug into it at all. But if you are in Libsyn, you have different destinations. So if you've signed up for the destination to go to the Amazon Music feed, apparently when you put in a 301 redirect, because you can do that yourself if you're moving away from Libsyn as a host to somebody else for your RSS feed, it does not include the Amazon Music feed right now. However, in the news story from Libsyn, there was a quote, "This is a known bug that we are working on to resolve moving forward. You need to ask Libsyn to configure that manually." Or moving forward, unquote. They say you need to ask Libsyn to configure that manually. So they still do it, but you have to ask them. And I always consider if you're leaving a host, it's a little awkward contacting them to put in a redirect to somewhere else. Now, hosts like Libsyn with a reputation will do it because they know if you start complaining about it, that word's going to get around. I have not heard of Libsyn not supporting somebody moving away from them yet. I don't know if it's ever happened or not. I just haven't heard about it. So I would put that in the category of unlikely that they would not support that. But apparently they're working on it. So I would say in a couple months, it would not be an issue at all. But it is an issue now. If you are moving from Libsyn right now and you're distributing your podcast to the Amazon Music destination, you're going to have to contact them in order to do the 301 to redirect for your RSS feed to your new RSS. Usually it's another media host service, but you'll see how that goes.
So there you go. That's your returning episode of Better Podcasting Live Chat. I wanted to say to SP that I appreciate you digging up all of that news for this week. I will give credit where credit's due. We're talking about producers and things like that. And you got a lot of good news stories that you dug up. And thank you very much for that, SP.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you for producing the show so I don't have to do it. This is honestly a win-win, folks, because I could not produce another show right now with everything going on in my life. There's a wedding going on later on.
Are you marrying me? What?
Yeah, we can't. Because you're already married.
I just want that, that extra Canadian percentage on the Gonna Geek show. You're going to come live with me, right?
Yeah, okay. Well, I guess if we can move to Utah. I think it's legal there. I don't know.
All right, well, that's going to go ahead and wrap it up. So if you want to chat with us for other things related to podcasting when we're not doing this show or the Better Podcasting main show, please come to betterpodcasting.com/Discord. So for episode number 29 of Better Podcasting Live Chat, I'm Steven saying this tags me as a producer and editor, but what is my true title?
This is SP saying I've had a lot of great guest appearances. Please ask me on your show. Got the K2 show, Chris and Christine show, got the Podtastic guest appearance, got the Mercury Theater podcast, audio drama, lots of great stuff. Contact me. I will guest on your show. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for checking out another episode of Better Podcasting. You can find the full back catalog of Better Podcasting at betterpodcasting.com. If you're into geeky podcasts, please check out the other podcasts on the Gonna Geek Network at GonnaGeekNetwork.com. This show was produced and edited by Stephen John Drew of Gonna Geek Productions.
And produced by SP.
Voice work was done by L.W. Salinas. Thanks again for listening or watching, And we hope to see you again next week.
You know what the great thing about that voiceover artist?
That she is a wonderful person and has done some has really done some great building of her resume over the last couple of years, and should be really proud of what she's done and how much she has developed over the last couple of years. And I'm very proud to say that I know her.
Yeah, and the fact that you do know her, and we can ask her to redo it at any time, and provided her studio is operational, she'll go ahead and do it.
She's fantastic.
Yes,
Laura's
I get to
great.
see her every week. Unfortunately, she's moving. She has moved, and she was supposed to get her new podcast desk yesterday.
Oh,
I haven't heard if she did or not. So we're hoping that she's going to be ready to be on the show next week. She booked a guest, so she better be there for the guest.
I don't know if this camera's gonna. No, I got not enough USB. I was gonna hold it up so that you could see what you would see right now if I stood, but I'd have to get a new arm too. That'd be attached to the monitor, but that'd be easy enough. But oh, maybe I have to do it. I wonder if they still have any. I actually bought it. It was a good deal. I don't. Oh, that's awkward. I don't usually talk about like specific retailers or things like that, but we're post show. I'll mention it. I didn't think it was a bad deal. I only paid like $109 for a sit stand riser that like it is manual, but it's still pneumatic or whatever, and it fits both my monitors on it. It has a keyboard tray as well, and it was at Costco, so it was easily available. And I don't know. I didn't think like for something like that, just over $100 was a bad price tag. Canadian too. Keep that in mind. Things are more expensive in Canada.
Yeah, I can't remember the brand that I have in work. It's pretty good, but knowing what I know now, because of the weight issue and because of how much podcast gear weighs and how many monitors I want and stuff like that, I'll probably go with an electric one. So it is going to be pricey for me, but it's going to be worth it in the end. And this is not anytime soon, although we're getting closer. So there is the wedding coming up, but I am fixing the major issues with the home. And so I'm able to start to do the drywall stuff. So I'm probably going to, I don't know if it's going to be before the wedding or not. The wedding is just this huge thing. And you don't want to take on too much before the wedding. So I'm probably not going to touch this before the wedding. The wedding is in October. So it'll probably be after October. I will be moving out of this into another space to podcast from. I don't know where that's going to be though, because honestly, I don't know how many kids are going to be moving back in, and due to the wedding, I'm gaining another kid. So I've going from 3 to 4, and I have no idea how many of those 4 kids are going to be moving back at any point in time. So we'll see.
That's a good point about the weight of the audio gear. That's assuming I put it on there. I could very well leave it off to the right and probably be fine, because as it stands, I'm not using the, like, let's say that I keep using the Rodecaster Pro for some reason, because it does fix my mute problems. Now, I don't know that I'm going to use the sound pads, because I would rather, unless I need the input, have it by my Stream Deck, because I like the fact that even though I'm running one extra wire to the Rodecaster Pro, I like that I push one button and it at the same time triggers the scene visually here, as well as plays my audio. And otherwise, I'd have to press the button like I used to, and then press the audio button. I like that I can just push one button like that.
Right.
Right. I like it. It's just one button on the Stream Deck. So, I guess maybe, yeah. I don't know.
So what I'm thinking, even today, is I would like the ability to have an audio rack mounted underneath, like a riser.
Right.
So have the sit down desk, and either have the audio rack mounted underneath the sit down desk or right above, and then put another riser on top of the sit down desk for the monitor suite.
Right.
Or a monitor arm bank get 3 to 6 monitors on there.
You would want the rack mount to move with you on the sit stand?
Yeah, I would. Yeah.
How come?
Yeah, I would.
Wouldn't you want to leave your audio equipment as stationary as possible for
yeah, but
longevity?
I want it to be within arm's reach. I don't want to have to if my hands are going to be at the keyboard and the mouse, I want the audio gear to be at that same level where my hands are.
Yeah, that'd be definitely be a hefty sit stand then you would need for that. Yeah, that's a good point. I probably would just I could probably deal with all the other stuff being stationary, as long as I'm standing and have easy access to.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, you want things not to move around. You don't want them to jiggle, especially how many issues you've had with cords
Well, that's
over the past year.
That's the other thing is like I'm not done with my sit stand because I'm waiting on a couple of HDMI adapters to come in because the HDMI cables I have going back to the monitors, they do get pulled on a little bit, so I need to get a L in there so that when I do sit and stand, they're not pulling on it, right? And I'm thinking about if you've got audio cables all going to your rack mount stuff, you need to make sure that they're very, very clean and not crossed, or else you could end up getting them to snag on each other with time as it goes up and down, right?
Right.
So that'd be the only thing I would think. But yeah, the arm's reach would be good. I can see that too. Yeah. Plus, you could probably sell your desk for a pretty penny because it's a beefy piece of furniture.
Yeah, this is antique. It's straight out of a mercantile bank that's been around since like I think 1950. I have some of the original build sheets or build specs, taped up on the drawers on the inside. I've got the matching, what do you call it? Hutch or whatever? Not hutch, credenza behind me. I do have hutches on both, but they were aftermarket. I want to say they were off of Amazon or Office Depot. I think they were off of Office Depot. So they're not, it's not the same cherry wood. It's not, I was fine drilling into them and treat them like a prop set and, putting clamps and lights and stuff like that on them. But I do have the surfaces of the desk. I bought, what do you call it? The impact resistant glass.
Oh, right. Yes. I forgot that you bought that.
Yeah, I have glass tops on it. And we had the original conference table from the bank in the kitchen area. So I have no problem hosting the kids. When all the kids are over here, we have plenty of space for the girls and my son and their boyfriends and pets around the table, dogs around the table and stuff like that. I mean, it's huge. It's a easily a 14-person thing, but it's almost too big for the space. But yeah,
I just thought of something else I'd have to do. I'd have to look for a different TV mount.
So these are all solvable issues,
Yeah,
Stephen.
because like otherwise, I'd be looking down. It'd be terrible. I'd be looking down all the time again. I like looking ahead. Especially because, like, right now, the way it works for the Better Podcasting split screen, I've got the camera just to the, basically just to the left of if you're looking at the screen, the left of your frame. So, like, when I'm looking towards you, when I'm talking to you, I'm mostly looking at the camera. You can always tell when I'm looking at myself because I'm looking up there. Look at that guy right there.
I don't know. We've talked about it before. It's Logitech cameras. If you're looking straight at them, it's almost like you're looking up or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just the way that they are because they know they're going to be mounted on top of the monitor. So I've got my screen. I've got the show notes on the left hand of the screen.
Yeah.
I've got the connection in the top right, and I've got the chat in the bottom right of the screen. Now, unfortunately, it's really close to me, so you can see when my eyes are going to different parts of the screen.
Yeah.
But I do try when I'm talking, I do try to look at you because you're on the left part of the upper right-hand side of the screen. And I've looked at myself as I'm looking at that spot, and it's looking like I'm looking right at the camera.
Well,
so
yeah,
that works for me.
I find that generally for me, and I don't know what it is, but maybe it's the angle I've got it on. I have to basically look right at the camera to look right at the camera. Like I've been with the Better Podcasting notes, I've been trying to place them mostly right behind the camera because for those of you that don't know this, I have a TV on my wall that I use as like a monitor for when I'm recording this. And it has right now, it has just the full frame of Better Podcasting on it. But when we're really doing the Better Podcasting main show, and sometimes on Gonna Geek as well, I will make that a little bit smaller and put the notes that we use essentially right behind the camera. So as I'm scrolling through, I'm mostly looking towards that, but it still is so specific that, like, obviously I can't have them directly behind the camera or I can't read what's on them. So I'll have them like barely to the right or barely above, but you can still kind of see that I'm not looking right at the camera, but whatever, it's close enough.
Johnny asked in the chat if our show notes are digital or written on paper. And
they are 100% on paper. Oh, what are they?
Braille.
Okay, perfect. I was going to say they are 100% created on Braille, or I was going to say on paper, but Braille. I'm glad you let them in on that. And actually, SP, every week, he has to mail them to me. Physically mail them to me.
Carrier pigeon.
Yeah.
It's the cheapest way to get to Canada
exactly.
and the fastest way to get across the border, by the way.
Teleprompter, yes. Maybe in the future talk about that. But
yeah, I've been thinking about teleprompter. I mean, if we're going to actually read all of the show notes, it would be nice to have a teleprompter. Yeah, that'd be nice. But aren't they expensive?
They are for a quality one. Even like a small little one that's meant for your phone, like, is probably at least Canadian, over $100. And then if you get to like a full size one, and then you need to find the way that you're going to have to convert the information into the format that works. So it's more prep time, because now you've got to put it into the teleprompter software, because you can't just go and put your Google Doc up or the reflection won't be right. So it's, a whole bunch of work. So, but yes, teleprompter, it could be a possibility. But I think that's going to go ahead and close us down. Yep. Thanks everybody for coming on by. I think pretty soon post-show, you'll start to get a little bit of SP and SJ yard talk. It's about time for that to start up. I did make a purchase this week. That is a dethatcher, because I am bringing back my lawn, getting the proper drainage going again. This is the year I bring it back. I said that about last year, and then with COVID, I said, no, my kids need to ride their bikes. It's the only place they could. They had to do it in the backyard because we weren't wanting them around people. So this is the year I bring it all back. Nice, thick lawn again.
Well, I mean, you took away a big portion of your yard building that monstrosity of a podcast studio out in your backyard.
Yeah, that'd be the easiest thing. It's just build another shed. Just build another one.
Yeah, just keep on building and building. But unfortunately, we can't in my subdivision. Like, all my neighbors, like, how big of a shed can we build? Well, 200 square feet. That's all you get. 200 square feet. And I think yours is underneath that, but and it's surprising how big you can get if you go to the maximum dimensions and then you build up. It's surprising how big that you can get, but it's also a big building.
Yeah. All right. Well, have a good night, everybody. And come back on Sunday for All Things Good and Nerdy. And